This last Shabbat, I found myself here in shul on a Saturday morning, as I often do, but in the evening, I found myself in a church, which is a bit more unusual for me. There for a concert, I honestly didn't pay attention to what I was going to see, as I was just excited for the opportunity to see my wife perform with the new choir that she recently joined. And so I entered St. George's Church on Bloomsbury Way. I found a pew. I opened the program brochure to see that I would be treated to Haydn's Creation, which I had never heard before in its entirety. The program notes describe creation as Haydn's late 18th century answer to Handel's Messiah, which he intended to solidify his growing legacy in England. So the brochure informed me. The orchestral introduction to this oratorio is called Representation of Chaos, which should be a musical impossibility. How does one represent the eternity of nothingness which permeated the universe before creation? The words for this in Hebrew are tohu vavohu, which Robert Alter, an American biblical scholar, translates beautifully as welter and waste, explaining that it references a vast emptiness or futility. How would Haydn set this impossible nothingness to music? Would we be treated to silence? Would we experience something similar to the culmination of the Beatles' A Day in the Life, with its ever-increasing, reverberating, overlapping E major chords slowly intensifying into an almost impossible crescendo, which author Jonathan Gould described as a 40-second meditation on finality that leaves each member of the audience listening with a new kind of attention and awareness to the sound of nothing at all? As the rustling in the sanctuary died down and people settled into their seats, the conductor dropped both of her arms in a sweeping motion, and the entire orchestra took up a C chord, which filled the hall, not with melody, nor with rhythm, but certainly in unison, a grand noise which teased out for a bit and slowly died into nothingness, leaving the entire space void of noise for several seconds. I suppose one must have something in order to appreciate nothingness. The melodies which followed would build slowly, refusing to resolve in any predictable way, proceeding on to new melodies, and so on. And this was chaos. In its time, representation of chaos defied any contemporary 18th century musical progression, and likely frustrated many listeners and critics. I believe this was the point. Chaos is what exists before order, and we can only understand it in retrospect, having something harmonious to which it can be compared. At this point, you may ask yourself, why am I speaking about creation and chaos, heard in a church, as my Shabbat evening sermon? Certainly I know that this week's parasha is Vayishlach, in which the two twin sons of Isaac, Jacob and Esau, reunite after Jacob's years in exile, following his deceit and trickery in stealing his older brother's inheritance. I do know. While this is certainly true, rest assured that due to a bit of chaos, the creation story, which is told in the opening chapter of Parashat Bereshit, or Genesis, is very relevant to this Shabbat. The service we have just heard masterfully led by Eli, our bar mitzvah, was meant to be almost 2 months ago, but due to a bit of COVID-related family chaos, we decided to postpone until this week. And his parashah, which you will hear him chant tomorrow morning, is Bereshit. I will leave it to Eli to tell you about those first 4 days of creation, but I'd like to dwell a little bit more on chaos. What is it that we find so terrifying about the unknown? In the lack of resolution and in the inability to find order. That moment in our creation story, encapsulated in the vagueness of the words tohu vavohu, is so pregnant with possibility. Chaos, welter and waste, nothingness and void, formlessness, all require something, a creation, a resolution, in order to be fully appreciated. Chaos comes before the plan, prior to settling down to that monumental task of making nothing into something. Artists know this struggle. Painters sitting at a blank canvas, imagining endless possibility. Writers sitting before a blank page, struggling to make the jumble of words in their limitless imagination form into meaningful letters, words and phrases, something worthy of the page. Composers staring at the blank staves, notes and notation dancing in the periphery of their mind, elusively evading their grasp. Sculptors staring at a marble block, contemplating the negative space which they must chip away in order for their creation to emerge. All of them experience chaos, tohu vavohu, the impossible vastness of nothingness married to the infinity of potential before them. And so it was before God set about on the work of creation. And so it is when we set our minds to a new task. And so it will be when our plans fall to ruin and the pieces collapse into a jumble, a mess, welter and waste, chaos. In St. George's Church on Bloomsbury Way just 6 short days ago, an expectant audience was treated to an expansion on those 2 Hebrew words, tohu vavohu, and a profound lesson in the creative process. In a church setting, we might hear biblical creation described as the production of something from nothing, creatio ex nihilo. If such a power is possible, this could only be God. In the examples I previously presented regarding the creation of art, which can absolutely apply to the beginning of any creative process, it may often feel like we need to form something out of nothing. But is that really the case? I described tohu vavohu earlier as pregnant with possibility, the idea of pregnancy being that some matter mixed with other matter is capable of creating life. While our minds may feel chaotic at times, and the work we need to accomplish may seem to come from an impossible void, nothing in this world is born from nothing. That tohu vavohu in our minds, which precedes the creative process, is the chaos of possibility. The ideas which form and swirl and present the possibility of a new reality waiting to be teased out and formed. Eli, you have put a great deal of work into the preparations for this Shabbat. In the beginning, sorry for the pun, before we ever started preparing for this day, you were one of my students at Rimon, our cheder, and you were not afraid to offer challenges in the classroom, casting skepticism on the biblical role of God and the veracity of the words of the Torah. But this has in no way diminished your enthusiasm for learning, for asking questions, for sharing your opinions, and lending your voice to the inevitable chaos of the classroom. Then we began to study your parsha together, the first 4 days of creation, often translating word for word, just so you knew exactly what you were reading, and comparing our text to the origin stories of other world cultures, which you'll tell us a bit more about tomorrow, I believe. This was also my mother's parsha for her bat mitzvah 2 decades ago. And as a religion school teacher and a B'nai Mitzvah tutor herself, she would have been so very proud of the work that you have done and the thoughtful Jewish adult that you have become. In her words, she would have simply said, "Good job, kiddo." When the time came for your bar mitzvah 7 weeks ago, you were ready. The pandemic was not. Chaos entered the life of your family, and you worried that you would have to wait another year, as so many others had. But this Shabbat, you embraced the chaos. That Shabbat, you embraced the chaos. And you participated with me over Zoom in a joint sermon and settled into a patient waiting period for this Shabbat to arrive. It wasn't the plan, but together we turned a bit of tohu vavohu into something positive, leading us to this day. And I think your family couldn't be more proud as well. And I could not be more proud to be your teacher. And so, here's my advice to you. We are all full of a bit of chaos. It seeps into our lives, it upsets our plans, it stymies the process of creation. But it's not our enemy. Chaos is that primordial mixture from which all things must flow. Embrace it. Allow it to swirl, to build, to grow into that crescendo, and occasionally for it to overwhelm the senses. When the cacophony settles down and the last notes die away, what is left in that silence of the mind, is the potential to begin. And in the beginning is how all difficult tasks must start. Shabbat Shalom.